Okay, we are up to Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph. We're up to the two dots on Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph, 73a1, and we're going to go further in the machlokas and the debate between Abaye and Rava about what constitutes a malacha that would necessitate a karban chatas or not. So Itmar says like this: Niskavin lizrok shtaim v'zarak arba. A person intends to throw an object in a public domain 2 amos. Okay, and instead it ends up going 4 amos. Okay, so for all of us who are not so great at throwing, so I have my keys over here and I'm studying the public domain. In order to be chayiv, in order for a person to really be liable, you'd have to throw something 4 amos, which is about 8 feet in a public domain. Throwing it less, you are not chayiv. So let's say a person intends to throw something 2 amos, okay, but it ends up like, okay, they wound up too far and it goes much further, it goes 4 amos. So Rava Amar Pater. Rava, similar to what we saw yesterday, Rava says that you're exempt because at the end of the day, my intention was only to throw 2 amos. Abaye Amar Chayev. Abaye says that you are going to be chayev. The Gemara explains. Rava Amar Pater. Rava says you're exempt. Lo k'mechaven l'zrika d'arba. Because although I did intend to throw, I did not intend to throw something 4 amos. Abaye Amar Chayev d'ha k'mechaven l'zrika ba'alma. Because the person was intending to throw, and even though I wasn't intending to throw a throwing that would make me liable, i.e. 4 amos, but I did intend to throw, and therefore I'm going to be chayiv. This is similar to the last discussion where a person intends to cut. So there the person intends to cut something which is detached, and he ends up cutting something which is attached. So there, Rava said you're exempt because I didn't intend to throw something which is detached. And Abaye says, no, since I intend to cut, to detach, even though it wasn't intending to detach something that was attached, still I intended to do an act of detaching, and therefore I'm going to be chayiv. So it's very similar. The Gemara is actually going to ask, why do I need all these cases? They're actually identical. And we're going to have another dispute, and it's also we're going to ask why are we keep on giving different examples if they're all more or less the same thing. We're going to see each one is a little bit different. So the following case, let's say someone was throwing something and they thought they were in a private domain. They thought it was surrounded by walls. They thought there was no issue in doing it. But they intend to throw something. They intend to throw something 4 amos, but they thought they were in a private domain. It turns out that they're actually in public domain. Rava Amar Pater. Rava says again, you're pater. Why? Because I didn't intend to throw in a public domain. Abaye Amar Chayev. Abaye says no, you intend to throw, and therefore going to be chayev. Rava Amar Pater. Rava says you're pater. Why? Because I did not intend to throw something in a prohibited state, in a prohibited place. Abaye Amar Chayev. Abaye says you're chayev. Why? Because at the end of the day, I intended to throw. Okay. Utsricha. Now the Gemara explains why I need to have all cases. The Iyashmin and Kamai said, had I only had the first case, the case of uprooting a plant, where I thought it was detached and it turns out it's attached. Bahu Kamarava, maybe you'd say only there Rava says that you're exempt. Why? Because I intended to pick up a watermelon that was detached, ended up picking up a watermelon that was attached. So my intention was to do something which was completely exempt. But when I intend to throw something 2 amos and I end up throwing it 4 amos, the arba below tarti lo mizruk aleh. Throwing something 4 amos, every time I throw something 4 amos, by definition, I'm also throwing it 2 amos. So included in every 4 amos forbidden throw, there is included in it a 2 amma throw. And therefore, this act was maybe partially forbidden. And therefore, maybe Rava would agree in that case that it would be chayev. And therefore we have to say, is there maybe he would agree to Abaye that he's liable, and that's where we have to say, no, in that case also Rava says you're exempt. And if we only had that case, the case of throwing it 2 amos, and it ends up going 4 amos, Rava, there Rava says you're exempt. Why? Because I did not intend to throw it a 4 amma throw. But in a situation where I think it's a private domain, and it turns out that it is a public domain, there I intended to throw a full-fledged throwing, a 4 amma throw. Again, maybe he'll agree to buy. In that case, they'd be chayiv, they'd be liable. Therefore, we need all 3 cases, right? So in other words, we have to just explain that although these cases are all very similar, there are differences between them, and therefore we have to just spell out that Rava says in all these cases, both in the case where I intend to cut a detached vegetable or whatever, and it ends up being attached, exempt according to Rava. And where I attempt to throw something 2 amos and it goes 4 amos, exempt, says Rava. And I intend to throw something in a private domain and it turns out it's a public domain, I am exempt. And Abaye says in all those cases, you are chayev. Now we're going to ask a question on Rava. Tanan. We learned in the Mishnah, and this question is going to sound similar. The whole dialogue is going to sound similar, the back and forth, because we've had similar discussions earlier. Tanan. Avos malachos Abraham chazer achas. You have 39 malachos. And we had a question. Minyana lamali. Why do I need to have the counting? Why do I need to say there are 39? Rabbi Yochanan. Meaning, you don't need a list to say there are 39. Just say these are the things which are forbidden. Why have to say there are 39 things forbidden? Okay, we could count. Who cares? Why do I need the number? So Rav Yochanan says to allude to the fact to say that if a person does them all within one lapse of awareness, you'd be chayav for 39 different karbanos, right? So if a person goes ahead and they do all the malachos in one state of forgetfulness, they're going to bring 39 malachos. So the Gemara says, Bishlam ala Abaye, this teaching that we just said fits and works with Abaye. Why? Damar ki agavna chayav, who says that the following cases where there's like a miscalculation of some sort, you're going to be chayav. Meaning, mishkachas la diyada di surah Shabbos, biyadala isra malachos, v'kata b'shurin. You have a case where a person goes ahead and they know it's Shabbos, and they know this malacha is forbidden, but they intend to do, the extent. There's a mistake in the extent, meaning, for example, the case we just had before, where a person, attempts to throw something 2 amos, they throw 4 amos. Abai would say that's a full-fledged case of shogeg. Or similarly, a person plans on grinding something which is less than the measurement needed for grinding, and they end up grinding the full measurement, right? So those would all be cases where I know it's Shabbos, and I know that the malacha is forbidden, but I don't know, I keep on making mistakes in the extent that I'm doing it, right? I'm a very sloppy person, so I keep on thinking I'm doing half, end up doing whole. So I could go through 39 different cases where on all those cases I'm going to be chayav. El Rava Damar Pater, but Rava says those types of cases, you'd be exempt. How do you have a case where there are 39 malachos that you're going to be liable for all 39 malachos? Meaning, bizdon Shabbos v'shegas malachos. If the person knew it's Shabbos, they didn't know about the malachos, right? They knew at Shabbos, they did not know about the malachos. So if you hold, like, remember we had a machlokas a few days ago between Rav Yochanan and Rav Shimon ben Lakish. According to Rav Yochanan, you could have this case because I know that it's forbidden, I just don't know that it's kares. So I did all the malachos, but not knowing that it's kares, and therefore that's the shogeg. The shogeg was I did not know it's kares. At least several like Rav Shimon Lakish, the Amar ad shishkak b'lav v'chares diyada lil Shabbos b'mai. But if you hold like Rish Lakish, who holds that I have to be shogeg, I do not know that it's forbidden, and I don't know that it's that there's kares punishment. So in what way? What's the scenario where I could be chayav for all 39 malachos if I don't know it's Shabbos? And I don't know that it's that there's a kares penalty over here. So in what way do I know that it's Shabbos? In other words, I'm doing all these things without any knowledge, but I have to have some yediyah. There has to be some knowledge over here. So in what way am I knowledgeable that it's Shabbos? I don't know that it's Shabbos. I don't know these things are forbidden. And we can't give the scenario where, okay, but I do know, but I'm doing only partial malachos. That doesn't work according to Rava. So what's the case? That's the Gemara. We saw this before. We know that it's Shabbos in the sense that I know the laws of Tchum, the laws that they can't go past the city, and this goes according to Rabbi Kiva, who holds that the laws of Tchum are biblical, and therefore, according to Rava, the way he's going to read this Mishnah, Rava, within the approach of Rish Lakish, he would say the person knows that it's Shabbos. How does he know it's Shabbos? Because he knows there's this thing called Tchum. But all the other stuff he does not know, and then he does all the other 39 malachos, you're chayav for 39 things. According to Abai, you can have an easier case where you know it's Shabbos because I really know it's Shabbos. It's just that each type of these malachos I think I'm doing half of them, I plan on doing half of them, I end up doing all of them. That's the case where a person could be liable for all 39 malachos. Okay, bottom line is we leave this question unresolved, Abai and Rava, about these scenarios where I plan on doing partial and I end up doing whole, like plan on throwing 2 and end up going 4, or think that it's Rosh Hashanah, it turns out Rosh Hashanah, or I think it's detached, it turns out it's attached. Rava says you're exempt in all these cases, Abai says you are chayav. Now, we're going to go through the 39 malachos. What are they? And we're going to start discussing each and every one of them in detail, but first we need to go through the list. So far we've been discussing very broadly a lot of complicated discussions about karbanos. It's going to get a little bit easier now. So here we go. You made it this far? Great. Let's go. There are 39 malachos. What are they? Hazoreh, a person who sows something on Shabbos, put a seed in the ground, even though nothing's going to grow on Shabbos itself, you are chayav. Okay? V'chorish, plowing. Plowing is you basically make the earth soft. You start hitting, moving the earth so that it's soft, so that it's plant in it. Anytime you're going to be digging in the earth, or anything like that, that's called plowing. V'kotzer, reaping. Reaping is there are things which are planted and you're detaching them. V'ma'amer, gathering things together. When you detach things and you gather them together, that's also malacha. We'll see what the examples of that are. Vadash, to thresh. Okay, thresh is separating the kernels of grain from their husks. Vazore, zore is winnowing. Winnowing is basically the next step. What you do, there is, after you extracted the kernels from the husks, you want to separate them. So what you do is you throw them up in the air, and the husks, which are very light, they get blown away in the air, and the kernels fall, and that's called winnowing. Haborer, separating, okay, or selecting. Hatochin, grinding something. V'marakid is you put something in a sifter. Havahalash, kneading, okay, so you mix water and and flour, etc. to make dough. That is called kneading. Someone asked me yesterday if you're allowed to play with slime on Shabbos. You're allowed to play with slime on Shabbos, I believe, but what you're not allowed to do is make slime on Shabbos, right? They wanted to make slime on Shabbos. Making slime on Shabbos, you have to go through the act of kneading because you're mixing solids and liquids. That's called kneading. Va'ofa, and baking. Okay. Hagoz zatzemer, shearing wool. V'amalabno, whitening the wool. V'amenapzo, disentangling the wood. V'atsovo, and dyeing the wood. V'atove, spinning. Vamesech, mounting the warp. Okay, what is mounting the warp? Okay, so if you ever been to like any of these like colonial villages or whatever it is, where they show you how weaving was done. Weaving was like this, it's cool to see how they were able to do things mechanically, but basically what they would do to weave is, to weave something, you need threads going this way and this way, right? Vertically and horizontally. Now, to do that is a very long process. So what they would do is they would take threads and all the odd ones, and they would attach them to different contraptions on each side, and all the odd ones would go into one contraption, all the even ones would go into another contraption, and basically through your feet, you'd be able to push that the threads would be going up and down, and while they go up, you put one thread this way, and then it goes down, you put a thread this way. Okay, so v'mesach, mounting the warp, is when you're putting the threads, attaching them to the warp, which is the machine that's going to help you do the weaving. That's called mounting the warp. Va'osa shtei batei, setting two heddles. Heddles is basically where the ends of my threads. My fingers are threads, if that wasn't clear. Okay, so the ends of the threads, you put them through these things called heddles. That's the hole that you put them through, and then once they're in those heddles, then you're able to start, doing the weaving process and moving them so that as you put the thread back and forth. So setting two threads into these heddles, va'orik shnei chutzin. And then if you do two weaves, that's weaving two threads. Va'potzeh shnei chutzin, or you move two threads. Okay, va'kosher, you tie a knot. Va'mater, untying a knot. Va'tofer shtei tfiros, sewing two stitches. Hakorel manas litvar shtei tfiros, or tearing in order to sew two stitches. Okay, so we're going to go into detail about all these different things. Now, a new set of different malachos. Hatzad tzvi, trapping a deer. And that's not just a deer, any animal. Hashochto, slaughtering it. Vamafshito, skinning it. Hamolcho, salting it. Vamabed is oro, tanning the hide. Okay, so basically there is like it's fine. It's part of the process of you salting it, and the Gemara is going to go into detail what is the difference between salting and tanning. We're going to get there. The machko, smoothing it. Okay, this malacha is going to come up in a couple of different interesting places. But then you go ahead and you smooth the hide. That's also malacha. The mechatcho, you cut it by cutting it in a very deliberate and exacting fashion. Hakosif shtei osios, writing two letters. Vamochik amanos lichtov shtei osios, or erasing in order to write two letters. Habona, building. Vasoser, demolishing. Hamechabe, extinguishing. V'amavir, kindling a fire. Hamakav, patish, striking the final blow. We'll see what is included in that, included in striking the final blow. But basically, when they would make metal, it's like something made out of metal. So you're making armor. So there's a final blow. When you're like done, you hit it one last time with a hammer. That's called makav patish. And we'll see a number of things that are going to be included in that. Hamotzim rishus rishus, taking things from one domain to another domain. Hare elam malachos arbaim chaser achas. These are the primary labors. 40 minus 1, meaning 39 malachos. And now the Gemara is going to go into much detail, and we'll see a lot of practical applications of all these different malachos. Have a wonderful day.